I'm Sky King, and this is my story. I was born in Dallas, Oregon, and when I was 2 months old, 2 or 3 months, I believe, moved to Hood River, Oregon. Um, and that's where I live now. And I haven't left for more than a couple of weeks in my entire life. So the story starts. I come from a very, let's just say, mixed, let's just say spiritual background. Um, my father was shaman, and my mom, she, let's just say spiritual. Um, so I was raised in a very free loving kind of environment, communes, powwows, running in the woods. My dad was in the woods, and so was my mom. Back then, this town was just trees, there was a small population. And anyway, um, my mom was a preschool teacher, so I was in her preschool here in town. And I was a very, very happy from what I can remember as a young boy from, up until I was about 5 or 6. I have this, being brought up with all the love, and it was the love in the gatherings, and it was the love in the communities that I was surrounded with. But when I hit about 5 or 6 is when I started experiencing what addiction and alcohol abuse can, the impact it has on the family. My dad was a musician and a wild man, if you will. So I lived in a small house. We moved out of it when I was 5. I don't have much memories of it there. To be honest, my childhood is kind of fresh to me. There was a lot that was blocked out. So I moved here in town, just down the road a little bit, which is where my mom still resides, when I was 5 years old. And in school, preschool was all free loving, and I saw everything so good. And I remember being like really good at all the educational stuff, math, putting things together, equations, stuff like that. Like the round block goes in the round hole, So I could figure out how to put a square block in a round hole. But then all of a sudden, when I got about 5 years old or 6 years old, things started to shift, and I started experiencing really dark stuff. Like I said, my dad was a very dark man. He instilled fear into me really young, psychologically mainly. And so let's just jump forward to middle school when I started using and drinking. I was 9 years old, and I started. There's times I remember like sipping a beer before that, but the actual starting using was marijuana and alcohol when I was 9, and continued solid up until last year, earlier this year. And if I was incarcerated for any time, I always had a prescription, always, that was mind altering from the neck up. So I never truly had sobriety. I got into middle school, and I was problematic. You know, I acted out. I was drawing for attention. My dad was in and out of my life, mainly out, but when he was in, things were intense. But for some reason, he was my hero. Like he was my devil, if you will, and he was my God, if you will. So I started passing along marijuana in sixth grade, if you will. You know, contributing to other people's addiction. I couldn't focus, and I was told that I was ADHD, but my mother didn't believe in Western medicines at the time, so I wasn't treated for it. And I'll say it now and I'll get back to it later in the story, but I'm diagnosed schizophrenic. And I'm coming to realize that the the diagnosis of schizophrenic, the traits carried well into my childhood. I had a very strong connection when I was in my youth, spiritually. I used to pray to the sun with my dad and speak. He raised me to be native, indigenous ways of spirituality. And I used to pray to the sun, and I remember hearing my creator, if you will, God, which I like to call my father. But now that I look at it, I didn't know what that was. I just thought that was part of life. Let's just say the psychological part started there. When you're raised, my dad, and we'll put it in these words, raised to hate the white man, it was really hard to look in the mirror and have self-love or any understanding of the world. And then, but I know both my parents loved me deeply, so deeply. So that's when I thought love was supposed to be like that. I thought love had no bounds in the darkest manner. I got misconstrued with what proper loving somebody is and what it really means. So I get into middle school. I'm slinging pot and drinking, and I'm very sociable. I was the comedian in the class. Anything to get that gold star feeling, that attention, because I don't remember my father giving me a compliment. My mother's scorned attributes from being in a relationship with somebody who is an alcoholic and an addict carried into the way she raised me. So I held guilt for who my father was. I felt very disowned in the family. My grandmother, my mom's side, she wanted nothing to do with me, and I didn't understand what it was all about. So yeah, childhood, it was kind of rough. Then I got into cocaine in middle school, and along with drug addictions and the way I was brought up. I was brought up with really good morals on what not to do, but I was also taught the opposite in some weird way. But I fed that addiction to whatever means to get it. So I stole from my mother money from the business she worked for. It was like a little bit here, a little bit there. And she took me to court and pressed charges. And I ended up in a foster facility a few blocks away. In my mind, everything that I did was justified for the pain that I was experiencing as a kid. I had no idea how to process it. I was stuck in the victim state. I yearned for my father. I always blamed my mother. I blamed her so hard for him not being there. And then, in turns, what goes with that dynamic? The mother's all, don't make me call your father, as if, you know, she could get a hold of him or we knew where he was, you know what I mean? But like that instilled fear. So a lot of my upbringing was really fear based. I was in a lot of physical pain as a young boy too, and that contributed. I went in an ambulance in elementary school for hurting my back, and that's when I got my first taste of codeine and opiates. And I was just in fifth grade, and so that was the start from there too, because I always had physical ailments. I've had them my whole life. When one ends, the next one continues. And then I had spine surgery, jump up to just starting high school. I was an athlete, a drug user, a drinker, everything, and wanted to be an athlete. And so that definitely didn't contribute to my health, but I ended up having open spine surgery in high school. And that was the start of my opiate addiction. I got my marijuana card while so I had OxyContin from the time surgery happened all the way till I was about 20, mid 20s. But in high school, it was like I was hearing opiates are bad, and then the culture I come from, marijuana it wasn't just socially acceptable, it was a medicine, it was a way of life. I was taught that. It was part of my upbringing from day one. I mean, it was used in ceremonies, it was used, but to each his own, but I have a different perspective on things now. So I had my medical marijuana card in high school, which, that didn't play off too well because I was on probation ever since I, stole from my mother in middle school and into high school, and then got charged juvenile probation, and I could never not get a dirty away. So my probation was all my childhood. And then I got a marijuana card, tried to justify it and say I would quit doing the opiates, but that never stopped. It was cocaine, opiates, weed, and alcohol. And to be honest, alcohol wasn't the biggest part of my story until later, but then moving past through high school, junior year, senior year, and I lost about 100 pounds in 90 days or something. And, I lied and said, oh, it's not from the drug, and it wasn't. It turns out I have Graves' disease and hyperactive thyroid, which the doctors told me it was releasing 7 times the amount of dopamines to my brain. And so I'd be up for days, and then I would crash. My mom would find me asleep in my closet for days, which, you would think they would call the hospital, but, anyway, she was probably just freaked out. And my mom has a lot of trauma still that my father instilled into her, from addiction recovery. She got to see it so raw as well. So I had my thyroids removed. And then when that happened, it was like taking this signal to my brain and then putting it at a halt and then trying to find some thyroid hormone and get it up to caliber. So like my whole processing got messed up on top of doing all the opiates. And I don't know how, but it just so happened that way. The addiction happened. I wanted what I wanted and I got it. I sought out doctors, and I had been raised with the utmost skillful manipulation out there, I think. My dad was very good at it. And so I sought out doctors that would do it from like a young age, So this is where my story, the schizophrenia really plays in. And this was before I was diagnosed. When I was younger, I was in the back of a truck going to my dad's house, with whom I call my soul brother now, my best friend from growing up. And I saw, a beam of light from the sky, a big one, across the river in Washington. and I heard things. And then that was the first start of it. But then when I got out of high school, I was at my father's one time, and he was burying his dog. And my dad in fire was a big ceremony. Like I said, he was shaman my whole life. But that was when I first experienced, and I ate, oh, by the way, let's get back to, I ate mushrooms a lot when I was younger, acid, all that stuff at a young age. And I thought I found, anyway, my dad was burying his dog because he believed if an animal would bite another animal in the family, he'd put him down. So he did that, and he was screaming at the sky in the middle of the night. And I walked over, I was scared shitless, and I'm in my young teens. And my father turned around, and my perception of what happened is my dad grabbed me and lifted me up. He was a big man. He was 6'4", well built. And his eyes rolled in the back of his head, and all I saw was whites of his eyes. And in a serpent's voice, he got in my face and he said, "Boy, I'm not your father, I'm Lucifer." That scared the shit out of me. I blocked him out of my life for a while after that. I turned deeply into my addiction to opiates, alcohol, all sorts of things. I think anything that would calm the noise that was in my head and my perception of what the world was. And I felt in my teens and in coming out of middle school, I felt so angry, so not in control of my body, and I didn't know why at that age. And nobody will tell you, "Oh, it's because you're all messed up on all these substances." I knew I had a heart and a light inside of me, but I felt I was in prison, and come to find out it was my own prison. So come to get 19, graduate high school. My son's mother and I had my son when he was when we were 19 years old. And I just, got the thyroids removed, experienced whatever stuff I was going through. And so I had more pills after that. I had my thyroid removed, I had spine surgery, I had chronic pain they diagnosed me with. It was anything and everything I wanted was handed to me. And so, and not to mention I was in excruciating pain all the time. So just hand in hand, it's justifiable, so what I thought. Then I get in my early 20s, I get a job in Mosier as a chef. I had 2 jobs in high school, worked as a dishwasher and learned how to cook downtown at a hotel here. So I went in, and somehow the culinary world just fell into place for me. It made sense, making art with food. And I don't know how I came to be like that, but I was. And that's when I started drinking a lot. I hit 21. I thought, okay, I got an opiate problem, so I need to stop, because I was already, opiate addiction, when you don't have them, that was my first taste of withdrawals. And withdrawals, you don't need to it's climbing out of your own skin type stuff. There's no safety, nothing. I was hypersensitive. I had all this weird psychological shit. So I found alcohol at high amounts to be something that would suppress all that. But the only problem was I was a huge, amphetamine and cocaine and hallucinogen, ecstasy, crack, DMT, mushrooms, acid, pills, opiates, whatever. So I was drinking and working, and then I got to work under a world-renowned chef in Mosier, and I did really well while living this double life of being, my baseline was a couple $100 a day of substance and alcohol just so I could function. I hurt my back, again, obviously, because you're all, doped up, alcoholed up, and lifting things in the kitchen, bending, whatever. So I pulled my back, threw it out in a really bad way. I thought I was gonna have to have surgery again. So I went back on the opiates, and this is when I'm about 23, 24. And they said, "Hey, you've been taking OxyContin for way too long, high doses, whatever." And I was recommended to start taking methadone. And I didn't know anything about methadone. I, for one, didn't know it was what they were giving people who were doing heroin, because I hadn't done heroin at that point. That was later. Anyway, so they gave me methadone, and because I was on such a high dose of OxyContin, they gave me enough for a horse, I'd say. And that went on for 13 years. And I don't know how to describe it, but if you've ever seen anybody on drugs, heroin or methadone or opiates like that, you're not really up and peppy. So I had to figure out how to do that. So that's where crank and meth came in. So it was pretty much speedballs all day long, and then try to get some sleep with alcohol. So I obviously couldn't perform once they gave me the methadone, and my back was all jacked up again. So I quit working at that restaurant in Mosier, and ended up having to move back to my son's mother's house for a little bit, and like I said, when you want something and you know how to get it, you'll get it. And the way that I compensated for not being at work but still needing to pay for my medications was to make money that way. So it just fed the cycle. So we can jump forward a little bit. I ended up moving up to Odell, and that was the first time, well, not the first time, but that was when my son's mother now had to be the sole provider because I was too fucked up all the time. And I had medical issues all the time. And most likely from being so messed up all the time. Whatever. The point being, it got so bad, but yet in my mind, I was a great father, right? I made it to all the ball games. My son played sports, he went to school, this and that. But now that I'm present and reflect on it, I remember multiple times, even though I went to every game, I was carried out of the game. And we're talking Little League, My son's just like 9 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old. And I remember, having family walk me back because I couldn't walk. And it got so bad that so I was trying to get off of the methadone now, being on them for so many years with a half gallon of booze a day. And I thought that was the key. So I was always jumping from one substance to another to try to get off of it. Like, I don't know where I thought that was going to work, but in the 12-step program that I work, it explains it very clear where that mentality comes in. And so it got to the point of where I was, laying on the couch, half the day having ice chips just so I could get another drink. And that was hard. There was a lot of just throwing up, being able to get enough alcohol to get more alcohol down. And then when you pass out, you wake up, slam your opiates, chase it with immense amounts of booze, and do it all over throughout the whole day. And then you wake up in the middle of the night from cold sweats and shakes, and then you do it again. So that my son had to go through that. His mom warned me many times that she would be done. She was done. God bless her soul for I'm just, I made my amends. I've talked to her. We had a good relationship. After that, we separated. She got into a relationship right away, got married. And that's probably the best thing that ever happened for her. And I'm so happy for her and her husband and my son's stepfather. Because his stepfather, whom I couldn't even say that word for a while, I felt so victimized. I felt so scorned because I couldn't see, I couldn't see what chaos I was causing. And then this whole time, I didn't realize I was suppressing the noise in my mind and what I felt spiritually, and visually, mentally, everything. I didn't know what reality was. I didn't know. I was so far from. There was no spurts of, okay, well, I'm up in the morning. I'm going to try not to drink today. Like it was so far gone. It was an altered world. It felt like. So they got together. I remember my son's stepdad playing baseball catch with my son outside of my house with his mother and I lived in because I was so fucked up. And here I am like, oh, this man is, stealing my child away from me. I'm victim this, I'm victim that. And how dare his mother, da, 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 da. But yet I can't get off the couch and go yell, because I'm so, like, I just sat there and internalized all this. And that man was the best blessing of my son's life at that time and to this day. He still is the sole provider for his mother and my son, who's now 20. Anyway, so after that, we separated, obviously, and I did the only thing I knew how to do. It was hustle to make money to support my habit, even though in my mind I was trying to quit. So as I'm like thinking I'm doing great because I cut down a couple pills a month out of like 32 pills a day with chasing the booze, and then I'm like, oh, I'm doing great. The next thing you know, I'm laying on my mom's living room floor with her and my son standing over me after I had just had seizures. And I opened my eyes and my son was standing over me. And so that's it comes to find out. I went into the doctor after that. My mom had me go to the hospital, and I had an alcohol-induced stroke, and then they told me that I had an alcohol-induced stroke a week before. And I didn't know that's how it worked. I didn't know you could get tested for a stroke, and they can tell you had prior ones. So I knew I had a problem. I ended up at this little motel down by the grocery store in town. And it's like take what you need kind of thing. Like I got kicked out of the house, as I should have been. And what did I take? A half gallon of booze, because my life was over, is what I thought. So I'm laying in that hotel room, and the way I got in the hotel room was like you get a voucher from the hospital. It's like a charity thing. So I had like 3 nights to figure out what I was going to do, and in my mind, there was no reality. I was still in that victim statement. Next thing you know, I get a knock on the door of this motel room, and it's I think it's like November or something. And I remember it being rainy and cold, and there's these 2 really big dudes. And I was like, oh no, like you never know what you did wrong. And so it turns out it was a 12-step call. My mother had gotten a hold of somebody in a 12-step program that she knew because she had watched their kids in daycare from when I was a child. And so I'd never met these men before. And they sat in there and they told me their experience. And all I saw was this man who could share and identify with me Right. And so like my mind and my spirit clung to this because I have such bad, or I did have such bad father figure issues. And the only way I used to relate with my father was to get high or drunk with him when I'd see him every, however long. And I mean, we used to snort Wild Turkey 101. He had me do when I was just a young man, an adolescent, if you will. So that was his thing. His thing was like raw. And so I looked at these guys and I'm like, oh man, these guys are telling me their story. And then they end the conversation with my sponsor, and this was 20 years ago. He's my sponsor today, but he 12 step, he said, just give me your word. And I'd never had the opportunity to give my word anymore. I burnt that bridge a long, long time ago. So he said, give me your word, you'll make it to this meeting down the road the next day. And I don't know what came over me, but I did. I made it to that meeting. And so that was my first taste of a recovery program. And I wanted it so bad. And I had to cut down alcohol. I had alcohol-induced strokes. I was having just medical problems up the wahoo. But yet I always had those prescriptions. I always had the opiates. I always had neuropathy medications. I always had benzodiazepines, all your Valiums and your Xanax and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, the thing is that didn't stick. I honestly didn't want. I did want to have, like, the core of me wanted it, but I was so embedded in my addiction and recovery, and it apparently wasn't time, which I've come to find out that's a real deal. Is it's time when it's time. But I believe what 12-step programs say about there's an easier, softer way to do things. And I hope this video in the end will help. But it wasn't enough for me. And I was so at loss. My son was my world, only I never treated him like it was. And I spiraled out. I started, doing the whole rave and party scene again. And then I started smoking meth. Well, it started with, back then, we had crank, is what it was called. And then it was like meth, smoking meth, this and that. And weird thing is, I ended up back at my son's mother's mom's house, my ex-mother-in-law. We were never married, but we were together 13 years, my son's mother and I. And so I ended up at her house and was helping pay the bills because I had assistance because I couldn't work because I was all messed up and all this. So, and I, had an income from medications. So I was up there, and this is when what I know to be the diagnosis of schizophrenia, and I'm not going to justify or soften the blow. Schizophrenia is what it says. It is the traits of what the diagnosis is true, but in some cultures they consider it enlightenment. In some cultures it's whatever. But the fact of the matter is, in our country and probably all around the world, it leads people who don't have the support system or know the hoops to jump through or where to go or how to get the assistance. Drugs and alcohol, the minute you get that, you're in that loop. And that is the one thing that brings you a little peace of mind that numbs it out. So anyway, I'm up at her mom's house, and I've been smoking meth every day for a long time, drinking, whatnot. And then my father died. I got a phone call that said, hey, and I had cut my dad out of my life before that because he was sick and I didn't want him around my son. And at that time I couldn't see my son anyway. And at that time I was still using anyway. So I was just being hypocritical. I was so in my own world and like ever since that incident where my dad said I am Lucifer, like I had this really weird connection. Anyway, the point being, I got a phone call saying he was going to die, and if I wanted to say my last words to get over to Washington to where he was. I made it over there a half an hour after he had stopped talking, so there was people there that I didn't know, people who were in active addiction, whatever, paying their, you know, respects, or I don't even know. I was so out of it. And when I saw that shell of a skeleton of a 6'5" man that used to be a well built, he was my hero. I cracked, I crumbled. So then, actually, the last thing he did say to me was, "Get your fucking hands off me, asshole," because I was trying to move him. Anyway, so I had a lot of unresolved issues with my father. I never got to talk to him about them. I had a lot of questions. So I get a ride back, and then, I was with him for 2 days. That 2 days during that period, my brother, his other son, was there. I have two brothers, one same mom, different dad, one same dad, different mom. So anyway, my dad's other son and I, it was weird. He had a Buddha bracelet on or something, right? And I thought he was shaman the whole time. I don't know anything about religion. Let's mind you that, right? I don't know anything about organized religion, this and that, other than I went to a synagogue in California with my mom's father and watched these old, Jewish guys with like curly things and like sounded like they were hawking loogies around a podium, and I drank sacramental wine. I don't know what that was. Anyway, the point being, here's my dad. I have all these unanswered questions, this and that, and he's dying. I'm watching this man die, who was my hero and also my demons. And so I was holding one hand, and my brother was holding the other, and he passed his last breath at 3:33 in the morning. And so I didn't really know how to handle it. So the hospice chaplain comes in, and he's going to do some prayers and stuff, and I'm just like, whoa, like what's probably coming down for sure. And not understanding why this Christian man would come in and say prayers for my father. Anyway, so I dipped out and I went and got high, and then came back because that was how I got my baseline. That's how messed up I was. My dad just died, and I had to go roll a bowl of meth. Anyway, so my dad dies, and then my brother and I have to move his stuff out of where he was at. He was always with another woman. My dad was always with a different woman. And then he had stints with women for a long time, but this woman who he had a stint with a long time, they ended up having to go to a different area in Washington because of drugs and alcohol and all that. I had to get the stuff out. So there's all these belongings, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I want to, so I take what I do. My brother doesn't want any of my dad's stuff. I'm sure he got a couple things. My dad didn't have anything. It was like a bass, my dad's shaman staff, and then in these few bags of things, which was granted. So my dad had things with knickknacks, so did my mom, and I do too. Anyway, he had this Bible from the 1800s, and it was like, all kind of worn and leather, and it had like hand painted pictures, and I'm thinking, why did my dad have a Christian Bible? I don't get this. And like, so I have my dad's stuff, right? And I go back up to, and I don't drive, obviously. People hauled this stuff up there, and the lady I was living with, which is my son's grandmother on his mom's side, and also was living with my son's cousins too. I was like helping what I thought was help raise them, be a mentor to these kids that needed it and stuff. And that's how twisted I was. I'm so high, I did not realize it wasn't healthy that I was probably around them. Anyway, so that's when this schizophrenia, a little over 10 years ago in 2014, 11 years ago, when he passed, that's when my first psychosis hit. Found this book, and it was a dark book, right? And it was always like it real in tune with energetically, is how I put it now. But I ended up throwing this book off of a cliff. Well, after I got back and had all my dad's stuff there, I went out doing whatever one day, getting high or something. And I come back and this book was laying on my pillow in my bedroom. And I started being like, what? It kind of shocked me. And then that's when I think I can pinpoint the start of the psychosis from memory. And what this psychosis did was set me on a journey that I've been on the last 11 years. Only now I come to realize it's a journey I've been on a lot longer. So psychosis happens, and the only way I can put it is what's reality to you isn't to others. And then again, psychosis, in some cultures is perceived differently. Anyway, so here's what happened. I grab this book, I freak out, right? I throw it in the corner, and then I start hearing, how I'm gonna put it is, like if you're at a ball game and you hear the guys up in the booth talking over the microphone, and it's like multiple voices, and anyway, but then it was like one voice, and it was a male voice, I would say. But you could hear the chatter in the background. And so what this voice did, I started seeing things. I started seeing patterns. And at this time, I didn't know what these patterns were. So I started seeing patterns. And it's not like I'm seeing an acid trip. That's not how I would describe it. It was like I would see something, and within that thing, so it started with picking up a coin. And then the coin, as I'm getting this narration, had a date on it. They're printed, what date they're printed. And it led me to a book, which led me to like an album cover. And so I'm following this trail, right? And anyway, it led me to a radio. And yeah, we still have radios then. And back up in the boonies where we were, you'd listen to it because no one had to pay for internet connection. We were dope heads. Anyway, so I tuned on this radio, and it guided me to go outside. So I thought, like, it was playing. It was weird. The radio station was playing what had just played in my mind from what I got on all these clues, right? And as I'm going down, all these clues are on my dad's things. So I'm going through my dad's stuff, and it's all trash and like knickknacks and things that are cool to me, but like just would be meaningless to others. But there were spiritual things. Some of them were. Anyway, so it leads me outside, and I see this beam of light that I saw when I was younger that I spoke about. And it's pouring. It's like a monsoon, and this is up in towards Mount Hood. And so I have my Gore-Tex. I did everything that I was narrated to do in my mind, right? And like, there's a difference between a conscience and psychosis. Like, I'm finding this out now, but I throw on my Gore-Tex pants, my boots, my flashlight, and no water, I don't think. And my raincoat, right, and I think a beanie, and I trug it, following what I perceived as this light, and then in this whole time, I'm getting these voices guiding me through the pitch black of the woods, and up there, it's like, there's a cliff, there's the river there, all these really, so anyway, I remember falling and having this this stick sticking up in my eye. And then I hear in this narration box, he's going to give up. He's going to do it. Anyway, so what this leads me to is a 2 or 3 day adventure in the woods where I am just, and I don't have drugs or alcohol on me, right? Like I've been out there and I'm in full blown what they say psychosis. And I'm in my mind, I'm going through like this training thing of physical and soul searching, physical testing, psychological testing, whatever is going on in my head. And I find myself going up across the street to this property. And I don't know, I just crossed the woods, and in my mind, I was following what I did. After I'm walking through the white water in the wintertime, right? And these are whitewater rapids, and I'm doing power lines that go across the ECC going up the valley. And shit I've never done when I was like healthy, you know? So I ended up on this property that's set up by an old Army veteran. And I start like going through what would be a boot camp type thing in my mind, right? And what I did was thrash this guy's property out in the woods that was set up. And so I'm like, just, and all of a sudden the sun's coming up, and I'm like, and it ended, right? Like, so I was going through this crazy test of what would you do? Like, are you going to complete it? All these narrations. Anyway, I'm in, like, haven't had water and who knows how long, all night long, and I've been doing all these physical things, and this narration shit's still happening. And so then I'm walking up this hill out in the woods. I don't know where I'm at either. I just know I'm in the woods. I was like cross properties from where I was and miles down the road. And anyway, and so this pit bull comes up to me and it's running up to me, and I'm like, you know, but like normally I'd be scared, but like I was like in my mind in tune with this dog, and it was injured or something. So I'm getting this dog up to this. I start walking and walking and realizing kind of like, oh, you know, this got me north, this got me whatever, you know. And I bring this dog up, and then there's these trucks in this parking lot in this house right down in the woods, and so I go and I put the dog right in the truck, right? And, you know, because he's injured, but I know whose dog it was. And in my mind, I was supposed to take that truck or something or whatever, right? And so I had the keys. The keys were, like, people leave keys in the ignition or under the seat or anywhere when you live out here and just whatever. You don't think someone in psychosis is going to come up and fuck with your stuff. Anyway, so I got this keys, and then out comes this man with a shotgun, no shirt. He's all tatted up. I'll come to find out. I found out who the guy was. Never met him, but comes out with a shotgun, right? And it's his dad's property apparently. And so he points it at me. What the fuck are you doing on the property? And the only thing that comes out is like, "Do you have any water?" You know, right? And he's like, "Yeah, it's up." And so I was like, shit, and I had the keys in my hand. I just like walked down the gravel road, and there was a bed of a truck where they sold firewood, and I just tossed the keys in there. On my psychosis, right? In my mind, I'm searching for, I think, my father, I guess, you know? Like, I'll tell you, we'll end up in the story, you'll figure it out. But I ended up down crossing the highway again, going down other properties. Sun's just coming up, so there's mist all in the thing, right? And I'm going, there's this fence, and I'm out in this meadow, and I hear click, click, and there's another fucking shotgun pointed at me. And some dude wearing an orange vest and camo duck hunting on his own property. He's like, "You're trespassing." I'm like, "Oh, sorry." And then I guess I just kind of walked off, right? So I'm walking off, and I get down to the river, and I hear things like my father's voice, and I hear other things. And then I realize where I'm at, and then I'm coming back, and I see this red light, this red laser, like a laser pointer, right? And I follow it. I'm chasing it down the railroad tracks. This is up in the middle of the woods, adjacent to the highway, but separated by tree lines. And I'm chasing it, thinking I'm getting to this end point of whatever this is I'm on. Like, I don't know. I was just chasing. I was running and chasing everything, high impact, high everything's mind, body, and spirit for the last couple days. Chase it ends me back up to right where I was living, right? And so the neighbor, he's dead now. He was a decorated Army veteran as well. Ends up was friends with the other guy. He was well known for being the crazy man around where we live. There's multiple stories. He was the guy who hunted in the woods with a kilt and a spear, hunting deer. He ate what he killed. He foraged. So like this, and he was always decked out in his army stuff. He was well known for just being crazy Vietnam vet, And he was built like a monster too. Anyway, this guy was notorious. You don't go on his property. You don't if you don't know the call, whatever. You don't go on his property. So I ended up on his property right next door, and still searching for something, right? And as I get over there, something tells me to get into his, it's his artillery shed and also where the four-wheelers and shit. That's just the dumb shit. You wouldn't do that to anybody, let alone if you're not fucked up, if you're sober, thinking right. But I did, and I opened it, and written on the wall in charcoal was "Set your father free." So that was mind blowing. And then I looked down at the counter where this guy does his own carvings and stuff, and there was my father's tobacco pipe and some of my father's belongings. So at that point, I don't know what the fuck's going on. This guy never knew my father. This guy never knew anything. I have no idea. Like, I didn't say, you know what I mean? But this guy was a very spiritual. He lived Viking, right? He made his own battle axes. They did shit throughout the year. You go in his house, there's just weapons everywhere and stab holes and just crazy, whatever. But very spiritual guy, very spiritual, the same way my father was. So I honed in real well with him. That and we did crank together, So anyway, that was written there, and my dad's stuff was there. My dad had just died, and this isn't shit that I had nor had I seen in years. So I go to ask questions. I get to the door of this guy's house, which is usually always barricaded with a railroad tie, like I said. On the door is a little card that it's like a torn piece of that, whatever, paper that's pressed together. Anyway, had a bear paw on it, and it said bears entry only. And so I have the tattoo of the bear. I was raised as that being my spirit animal. And so I thought that was for me. And then, like I said, I was in psychosis. And it's got to be like 6 a.m. now, sun sees up, and so I opened the door. And that's something you definitely don't do. Like, fuck, let alone breaking into this man's shed. So he could be asleep in there. He'd be pointing a gun at me. I don't know. But I go in there, and I look and so his window that faced where I was living was just this glass window. The sun was coming in through it. There's little mobile crystals hanging, stuff like that. And so I'm looking, just, whoa, how is this possible? My father, thinking I might walk up with my dad or something, who knows? Anyway, so I walk over there, and on this counter is Polaroid pictures, and it's me as a little boy with this man, with my father. And I'm just like, what the fuck? I didn't remember years of my childhood, and they're just now coming back to me. So that was jaw dropping. Something told me to get out of his house. After I'd seen these pictures, I was like snapping in reality almost. It was weird, and then I was like getting fearful. So I get out of his house and I walk out, and right there to a tree was my son's photograph. And I had been battling spiritual things, whether I was a good person or not, through all this and through my whole life, and knowing I had a light that needed to come out. And I heard a question in my mind: would you choose your son or humanity? And without thinking about it, with my flashlight, my pocket knife, I put a pocket knife through my son's photograph. And that was my choice at that time. So I went back to the house, right, and I went back out in the woods past the house, went down a little bit, and ended up in a ditch. Then I got up and was walking the road back, and my son's, who I was living with, my son's grandma pulls up and she's like, "We've been looking for you forever." I was like, "Ah," I get in her car. Next thing you know, I get back to the house. I get out, soaking wet, I'm freezing, I'm thirsty, hungry, whatever. But I get into my room and there's a bathroom off of it, and I'm being like, still kind of have traits of narration, and I get in the hot shower, get my boots off and everything, and like in my mind, I had done the righteous thing. I was being purified. I was being baptized in this shower because I had made the right choice. I had chose humanity over my son, and that was my first experience with having a conflict of God. I couldn't fathom that a God could be cruel like that, that you would have to choose that. And so in my mind, that's how it was, that life was not what it seemed, and that you had to suffer in order to survive, kind of thing, and what is after this life or whatever. And I thought that I would die in peace this way or be accepted into heaven. I didn't know anything about religion. So I go get some rest, and then I wake up the next day, and I remember everything to a T. But I'm not in psychosis as much anymore. And then the cops knock on the door, and they want my shoes and stuff because there was footprints on this property. And someone said they saw me, and it ends up being that duck hunter with the orange vest, who the second shotgun I ran into, had notified his brother was a cop and had notified him and said he saw me on that morning. And then the other people complained about what had happened on their property, and that they held the shotgun to me, and and I had trespassed, so I was trespassing. So anyway, turns out they charged me with trespassing, and at this time I'm not in psychosis anymore. But what had happened was so real to me that when I spoke the truth, they kind of guided me into Center for Living, or into a mental health facility that does outpatient treatment and stuff, and they diagnosed me and gave me medications because of the story that I told them. And so I started asking people like my mother, what the fuck? Why are there photos of me as a young man with this guy in this crazy guy's house, right? And so that crazy guy wasn't there apparently. It turns out he died just a little bit afterwards. So my mother says to me, "This is your journey to find out." Also that night I had visions of my father and other people around where I grew up, and things, people I didn't know, and visions of like flashbacks and stuff, and all this. I never had a good dream. People say, "Do you have a good dream?" I didn't know what those were. A nightmare to me was just a dream, because they were always nightmares, but they were weird. They were like the ones I have a lot, or like, the only way to describe it is like the outfit that the Knights Templar wears. It's like white with a red cross and all these weird things, right? And then I've had some really like further back and whatever, like, but I had never seen this shit in books or TV. I'm not educated. I don't Google. I don't social media. I don't watch TV. I don't. And when I did, it was Christmas stuff, because I love Christmas and I love making people happy. I love love, And so anyway, I get on antipsychotics, and it dims things down, right? And I'm legally not able to go talk to this guy's property I was on, who knew the guy that died. Like, I tried to follow the breadcrumbs, right? Like the police officer who prolonged the case, did whatever was working. He up and died with colon cancer. Judges and attorneys were all resigning because of conflict. Like, all this shit was so weird. So I'm like, it's conspiracy, right? And in psychosis, conspiracy for sure. Anyway, this led to, oh my God, I am crazy. Fuck me, pardon the language. So I go back to I started IVing meth. I I got with a girl and I started IVing meth and heroin. And, and I was eaten alive. What hurt the worst was I put a knife through my son's photo how do you walk up on a photo stapled to a tree of your son? What the fuck? Anyway, so I did though, right? At least in my mind I did, but it was physical. Anyway, so I didn't know how to deal with myself that I would choose anything over my son. And then I had to deal with, I'm fucking nuts. And I didn't know how to. And I still was an addict, and everything. They juiced me up, and they guinea pigged me around with antipsychotics for a while, antidepressants, to dial you in. That's how, there's no way to just prescribe something. You gotta get checked every month, and how are things going, get it reevaluated. Anyway, so they get me on this stuff, and it blocks out some sounds, right? But everything was so real, and I had started to piece some things together. My case manager from the mental health facility, she up and bounced town. My psychologist who diagnosed me, brilliant man, was from the town over. He up and dies with a brain tumor or brain cancer. So here I am left with all people are just dying. And I'm thinking in my mind, oh my God, how am I ever gonna prove that I'm not crazy and I love my son and all these crazy things, right? Never figured to me to get sober yet. So I started mainlining meth and heroin and taking whatever pills and doing whatever mushrooms, acids, anything I could, and found myself back on probation. And then I thought, and I saw it coming. I saw that probation was coming. I almost saw how it was going to happen too, but it's almost like you set yourself up for that stuff. But anyway, so I get busted, and I'm 28 days in jail, and I'm like, wow, this is the first time I've ever been sober. Didn't even think about what I'd been taking got me so fucked up too, and I got fucked up while I was in jail. That's a real thing. People just get fucked up all day, whatever. And so I'm in jail. I get out. I'm mandated to probation. I still had neuropathy pills. That was like the wonder drug when it first came out. I was like, whatever, I can do this. Somehow I couldn't do it. I ended up smoking pot, getting thrown back in jail, doing, whatever. And then I got off probation, and I was so shaken up by all this, right? That I was on probation. I thought I was doing good but I still had those pills, right? But I hadn't drank, but I was white knuckling. I was miserable. I was miserable about hating myself the last however many years had gone by, about that choice about my son and humanity. I was miserable about not grieving for my father, not getting to talk to him, and being left on this, what I thought was a breadcrumb trail. Then I'm with my son and I'm playing basketball, and I do an irresponsible choice, and I jump off this fence and I break both heels at the same time, right? And so I was in a wheelchair, living in an apartment that I got from the mental health facility assistance, and I'm living alone, right? And the only way to cope with doing that was doing more drugs. So I did more drugs and more drinking, and then I got forced out of it. I started doing some moral recognition therapy classes in probation. And, I had a choice. I was always, the only time I ever really clicked doing something was when it was mandated that you threaten me with my freedom. And, I was really and I didn't even do it then. And so I ended up getting through this stuff, getting physical therapy done, and after being in a wheelchair for a few months, I started walking again, and the probation officer was really, at the time I hated his nuts, for sure, but and now I see all these allies who have always been there for me. I remember my sponsor called me. He stayed in touch with me throughout the years, only when I would be in touch with him, but he's never went away, So I came into the rooms and I did the whole lying thing and drinking after meetings and doing whatever. And so I thought in my mind, oh, I'm healthy, I can get a job, And I was on disability for the time for mental health. I was like, I refuse. I had some pride issues and ego. I was like, I'm not going to do disability. So I went back, I got this job. And in my mind, I was doing okay because I was holding a job. I wasn't talking about my crazy stuff. I wasn't, uh, I wasn't slamming dope anymore or doing any of that. And so I got this job, and it was a club. You know, I was a chef, and and I hadn't drank in a while, in years. I thought I was doing good. I was sober because I hadn't drank, but I hadn't been doing all, whatever. Anyway, the point being to that story is I picked up alcohol in that club, and then I started, and then from there it was more cocaine, and then it was everything else, and I started to relive that psychosis, which would have been a drug-induced psychosis, is what I thought, and I didn't understand what was going on. I was getting so heavy into stuff that I was losing it. I was losing it. And there was people that were trying to be there for me. And I jumped into another relationship. And then I stole from the business. I worked it out with the business. They paid them back and then cut ties. But they knew they loved me. And I had built a good rapport with the people there because I held my shit together for a while. And I was, I treated people with respect. I'm a good man now. But I was losing it. And so, like, I started mainlining cocaine, and that's where everything kind of went south. And when the way I did opioids, opiates, psychedelics, alcohol, whatever, that's the way I mainline things. And they say there's like a rule, like wait an hour, wait till you at least can hold it still to do it again. I wasn't like that. I did everything from standing on my fucking head and my ankles and my arms, and I wear the battle scars to show it. But I would not, I wouldn't stop. So we're talking days and days and days of like every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes. And I had the means from working, and I had the means from hustling to make it happen. I would recluse, I would sit in a cave, and I would try to search on whatever that psychosis was, because there was a part of my soul missing. Is how I felt. I went, and a buddy from the club I was at, he gave me a spot to live. And so I was living there with a lady and him. And it hit me, all the pain and all the suffering I had done to people. And that psychosis was there. I quit doing stuff, right? And for a little bit, I got this place right out. So I finally moved out. I wasn't paying him. Couldn't keep up my shit. He tried to help, and I couldn't keep up my word, part of the bargain. So then I ended up at the house that I'm at now, right? And I hadn't quit yet, but I started. I started like hearing things, and things started happening again, and so I quit doing mainlining stuff after having a really bad OD, and anyway, so I quit, and then I got what I thought was sober, but yet I was being pumped up with antipsychotics at that time, and then I thought because I quit all the drugs, I could drink again. Now I can drink responsibly, right? So I kept it subtle though. I got a job at a well-known hotel in town, a different one, and I worked my way up to being the sous chef, and there was no executive chef, so I was the head for a while, doing banquets, a couple hundred people, like 150 people, whatever, in a high-class place. And then I broke my foot dancing in a bar one night and tore some ligaments, so I had a boot on. So I had to work, and I had to be off drugs. I couldn't not do drugs. I was like, I gotta work and I gotta get through this pain. I gotta whatever. So I got on Adderall to get me off of, the speed and shit. And then I was drinking, and then it got heavy, and I was like, so I went a year not getting surgery, not getting shit done, wearing a boot, and working 80, 90 hours a week. No wonder one's psyche will slip. Anyway, so that happened, and I realized I couldn't do drugs anymore. You know, my body couldn't take alcohol and couldn't do drugs. So I stopped. And then, go figure, you stop, but then psychosis is going, right? And I'm like, but I'm medicated and I'm whatever, but my psyche, like, what's going on here? And it let up, it was consistent. Like, things will get better. I'm just shooken up, you know. But I started reliving things, and I started having visions of certain things. And I didn't know what anything meant, right? Because I'm not religious, I'm not whatever. I just knew that I've been in this prison, and I used to say to people, I came from real, no ownership, no owning my own shit and claiming my chaos. I used to say, it's weird. Like a week later, I realized what the shit I had caused. Right? I'd be like, I'm just in this. It's weird. I'm sitting in this box watching this machine cause chaos, but yet I'm screaming to be a good guy. And no, you know what I mean? Like, I was the kind of guy who would be doing drugs, and as I'm doing drugs, I'm thinking, God, I hate you. You're gonna burn. As I'm taking it out, doing it, you know, like the whole time, I hated it. A lot of people say they loved it. It took everything away, but it didn't for me. I hated it. I'm sure I got into the fad when I was younger and drunk and at a bar. Once you get to that point, but leading up to it, all the guilt, all the shame, all the remorse, everything, like, it's just not what I wanted to do. But that was all I knew, and I was like just being in this vessel doing it. So in this psychosis is where I started to experience things like I did 10 years ago, 11 years ago, only the psychosis picked up where it left off. Anyway, so I'm seeing people, what I'm seeing is like I see you sitting here in your chair, but I start seeing this other entity like that is doing other things. Like, and so the only way I can describe it is a multidimensional state. Now that I've been learning what things are. So anyway, so I follow clues, right? Again, now I'm sober. Or just clean, if you will, no recovery program, but on antipsychotics, right? And so I was like, oh shit, maybe that's what phones are all about. So I Googled. And I'm like, so all the signs I had been seeing turns out is what they call sacred geometry. And I'm like, wow, you know? And so here I am following this. And part of the big psychosis 10, 11 years ago was I ended up like in this, like I was looking for a vortex of some sorts. I was looking for a way out that was going to end all the suffering I was feeling. Literally looking for a vortex, man. I'd be like pulling fuses here out of someone's house, doing this. Like I was looking for something. I was following codes, right? So the trip is, here it is, now I'm at this hotel, wearing suited up, chef's attire, meeting with clients that are having $100,000 wedding, you know what I mean? Like, and going through this shit and keeping it at bay. The only way I can say how I held it together is I've done a lot of drugs. So being fucked up is kind of my thing, was my thing. And so the suffering, I felt like I was suffering my whole life. And now I can put a word to it. Okay, and to come to find out it was my doing, you know. But so I started following these things, and the work was very good to me. The only problem is I started to cross people who would drop bombs. Like, I'm like, they're like, are you on a bad damn? Yeah, they're like, Zach is, you know, you're the son of the devil. I'm like, what the fuck? How do they know my dad held me up and said I'm Lucifer? You know, like, what the fuck? I don't even know you know. And then things started happening, and I'm like, what's going on here? And so I start following these things as if I'm going to find this vortex to this hell I've been living in psychologically, the hell of not choosing my son, the war I have now with God or my father, as I put it, because of the misunderstanding. Like, how can innocent children be, you know, hurt, or how can people die when they have birth, you know, that kind of stuff. And so I start following these things, and then I'm crossing people that are like confirming what I processed, and like it almost felt like I was being summoned. Like people were drawing shit at me, like The only way I would put it is like, I've watched movies in the past, craft, someone working a craft. And so I'm just like, whoa, I couldn't, I was out there, right? And so I turned in my letter of resignation the proper way. I sat the GM down and I said, hey, it's not fair to the crew. And I couldn't keep it together. And I went on FMLA, or I went on this leave that the government pays for mental health, and the doctors wrote off on it and everything, so I could get my bearings. I just thought it was from overworking on a broken foot, and I had been drinking, so I get sober. And then so I take the time off, and it's paid leave. So I start like this. So now I'm in this altered reality, and it won't go away. This psychosis, it just won't go away. And so they changed me to another antipsychotic, and it won't go away. And it's continued. It's a continuous from 11 years ago. And then I started having, memories that I had blocked out of that 7-year block as a child of all these things, and then replaying the tapes of the pictures in the guy's house and never getting to talk to anybody, no confirmation, whatever, thinking I'm going to find a way out of this hell that I'm experiencing. So I'm led to all these things within the house. I demolished the bathroom at the house I was in, following clues, right? Like looking in things, seeing things, leading me things here, and like being narrated again. But it was like, a woman has a woman's voice. And here's the thing, I had been in a lot of pain, right? And I started going into this pain at my house while I was on that leave, where I couldn't get up. I got a bunny, right? And so I was on the floor with the bunny. I couldn't get up off the floor, kind of stuff. I was going through the way I would tell people, and I kept telling doctors, it feels like I'm in an Iron Maiden. I couldn't describe it. And I had these pains, and I'm thinking they're from when I'd be used in my ankles and my feet and stuff, but it felt like crucifixion pains. And then I started having visions, right? And as I'm ripping up this bathroom, I'm breaking through these gates, if you will, of acknowledgement of what it all means. I'm having these flashes of like past life or just schizophrenic stuff or whatever, but they started leading. So I'm tripping out, right? And I think I'm so close. I'm following this trail. So I'm like following Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs trail of psychosis for so long, right? Well, I start piecing those breadcrumbs together as I'm like ripping things apart and following, it's like going through a mission, and then all of a sudden things are being revealed in my mind and in my spirit, and then I'm almost there. I'm like a week of almost being there, peeking out, couldn't find anything, but things I'm starting to get understanding. Well, I'm sitting on my couch where I don't know how to describe it. Like I had my brother, my son was there, and my roommate, and I was just like, I thought I was dying. Like I really thought I was dying. So I'm tripping out, right? And then that night goes by. And then I'm sitting on the couch one night, and my head popped, is the only way I can put it. Right? I got a bottle of alcohol. I couldn't deal with this treasure hunt, right? So I got a bottle of alcohol. Anyway, I was sitting on the couch, and I went through I swear to myself, I'll never do it again. I'll never, that whole, it's a real thing. It's a mentality. It's a sick disease. And I'm sitting on the couch, and I said, "Oh fuck, here it is." Like I felt all this tension and blood pressure in my body, and then I felt it climb up my cerebral cortex and go crack, 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 crack. And then I felt I thought my brain pop, right? And I saw everything tunnel vision, right? And it replayed, like from the first psychosis back to my son's childhood to whatever, right? And then it went black, and I fell over on the couch. And I had a roommate there to witness all this. It was traumatic for both of us, her especially. And when that snapped, when I heard that pop, it was like when you put a fast forward in a VCR and rewind. You remember those? And go blah, 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 blah. But it went from that day, that night on the couch, rewound all the way, like how many think skipped a beat. My whole life, through my son's life, through the vision of that. Then it went back through when my parents met, and then went back when they were kids. Like, and this is all within a split second, right? It's something I don't know how to describe. It's like being programmed, like, boop, reboot, and it funneled out, and then it went into like this shit that like was, like I said, Knights of Templar type stuff, and battles and like Mongolian stuff and Viking stuff, and boom, and then I saw myself from the celestial stuff coming in and boom, hitting what I would think would be the atmosphere, but it's like a multidimensional grid, right? Split into like 12 and shatter. Anyway, and then I'm sitting up there and was wherever up there is, and I see the spiral and the grid and what it is and the frequency, and I saw what it is, and then it went into fast forward mode and went the other way. So and saw what I saw, and then I popped up, right, and I'm up, and there's my roommate staring at me, crying, screaming, and I come into a complete freak out mode, and now how I see the world, it was like being, have you ever seen the movie Beetlejuice where he's like standing in this little world with like Velcro grass, and he's like looking up, hey. But so it's like being in a world like that, and I'm seeing everything just is like real, but it's not real. Like it's moving and vibrating, but I see everything normal, and so I thought my roommate had popped my brain and triggered it or something. I just didn't know what was going on. I jumped. I thought I was going to be crucified again. So I said, get in the car. And I'm not a violent person. I was in an abusive relationship. I got shit kicked out of me every day for 2 years by a woman because I thought I was helping her let her take it out on me because I'm not worth anything. Like my son knows this shit and witnessed it. And no wonder he hasn't talked to me in 150 days, 400 months and 27 days. Anyway, I just finished my 12 step on my 12-step program today. But anyway, so I ever get in the car, as I drive, and I'm like seeing all this shit that's like it's like there, but it's not there, but it's not like the psychosis stuff. It's like multi-dimensional shit that's the only way to put it. And so I go and I run a spree, and then I get brought back because I make a call to one of the people that works at the hotel, and I was like, you gotta bring me back, right? Like I can't go back to that house. I thought I was in the asshole of hell, and I had just climbed out, and I thought we were in some biodome that was containing me, and so here I am, and then that night when I got back from booking it out, cities away, down the freeway a few hours, I had gotten back, but I relit. So like first time I went in psychosis, I remembered everything for 10 years to a T, but suppressed it all, never mentioned anything. This time, what do I do with all that? Like I don't even know what's going on. And this is like 9 months ago. So I'm get back to the house. She lets me in. She obviously doesn't feel safe, my roommate, and I don't know what's what. And I still, so up to this day, I still see the way I saw when I came back up from what I thought my brain popping was. And so I get back on the couch. I'm still in that physical agony, like whatever it was. I thought I was being poisoned. I didn't know. I was so hypersensitive, so paranoid, so whatever. So I'm sitting on the couch. It felt like I was on fire, right? And something told me to pick up my phone, and I have like this Stargazer app that I downloaded when I first got a cell phone. Oh, this would be cool with a cell phone. Come to find out, I spent a lot of money, and I'm not a cell phone guy. I don't do anything on social media. I don't do anything. Anyway, I turned the Stargazer app, and I'm like looking around. I'm like feeling like I'm on fire and thinking whatever, So I go and I turn around, and there's a furnace on the app, a golden furnace on the app, sitting right on my couch where I'm at. I'm like, what the fuck is this? I took pictures of it. It's on my phone. So anyway, there's this golden furnace. And then instantly I start getting this feed through my head about the Holocaust, which is my mom's lineage, my lineage on my mom's side. And it had me replay all of the shit that I had said, like Jewish jokes, and never stood up for people dissing on Jews, and all this shit that not only I took, but what my parents grandparents lived through, and they disowned me like, or my grandma did. It felt like as a baby, and I never knew why. Anyway, so all these things of yeah. So I was like thinking, okay, this is my walk of atonement, my penance for that, And so throughout the 9 months, I've had stages that or phases of exploration and learning, and I have visions and I have things that come to me all the time. It was explaining one time I got led to this. So that night of the Stargazer app, I'll go back. The furnace, then I got led to this. I read what the furnace was about. And then it led to what was called this this altar. And it was in this galaxy that's like right up here. And I saw it was the Milky Way, right? And I saw my face in it. And I'm like, what the fuck? So I like, trying to get right. I refresh the page. I close out. I turn back on. I'm still there, Like, what is going on, dude? I'm freaking out. And you're like, so I zoom in on it and I start reading about it. And it started, so I have no idea what all this stuff is that I'm reading, right? Although it makes sense. And then there's this stuff about the altar and the solar disk and the gods of war and offerings to Shamash. Anyway, but all I know is my face is in here and I'm identifying with what I'm reading, and I start to relive that rewind, fast forward videotape that was played through my head. And I start being like, as if I know what I experienced multiple lifetimes ago. And so I'm tripping out, right? And then I went to sleep. Some nights had passed, whatever. Anyway, I had visions in my dreams. I call them visions, but they're just what they are. And it led me to having, and I'm not spiritual either. Like, I'm very spiritual now. And I was my whole life, but I stayed away from it because I thought it was dark. It was evil like my father was or whatever. Anyway, so I got out these things that were sacred to my dad, my mom, things that I picked up, things that, like, in this so-called psychosis I've been in for 9 months, that pieced together this puzzle. And then all of a sudden I was presented one night, full as clear as day, in a woman's voice, explaining to me my father. I mean, what people, we all have our different great spirit, source, God, divine mother, goddess, whatever you want to identify as if you have a higher power or spiritual connection or something outside of yourself, that the creator of all. And I'm like, what the fuck? So here I was thinking I was Lucifer's son, right? And then I get explained to me what the cycles of life are. And I got presented with people who I've known, people I didn't know, people in the community, my family. No, it's weird how to describe it. Not just like the blood that they are and the flesh that's walking the streets, but the entities that these beings are. And I was told. And so why I feel that this interview is going to set me free, and I'll jump into how the recovery plays the biggest role of all this in the 12-step program, how it worked for me. I saw everything and I didn't want to forget because it gave me closure for the first time. And I was told, and at this time I didn't know what it meant because I had never researched it or anything. And I was kind of looked at like a dipshit when people are like, dude, and I was like, what? But I was told, so my name is my English name in real life here in this third dimension. And backwards, it's King Lion, bringer of eternal life. That's what it means. And I was told, and like I said, I'm going to come out and say this, what's going to set me free? Period. Internally, if it's real or not, it's real to me. It's my story. I was told that my name is Morning Star, and that's what's on my knuckles. And I didn't want to forget. It was the one time I felt a connection spiritually, mentally. I felt peace, quiet in my mind. And so it was explained to me what that meant, and it was explained to me how that related to my father of this dimension who passed, my father or whatever. And I saw what I thought was a conspiracy, what was the whole society was, but what it was lifetimes ago, thousands of years. What I saw, I thought it was a setup, like I was a fall guy, I was whatever. But what I did was I saw how life was fabricated, and how this is a multidimensional world in my perception, and how it all plays together. And I never listened to the people that are like, "So do you believe you're the prophet?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" For one, I didn't know what a prophet was. I mean, I'd heard it. For two, I didn't, but now that it didn't take people trying to draw it out of me, or people agreeing with what my psychosis was, for me to accept who I truly feel I am, which is just who I am here in front of you. Just a man, just an equal, just trying to find some peace and solitude and spread love, right? And serenity. So, right, this was all explained to me, and now I have people call divine timing, thanks to the recovery program, right? Like if I would have just, no would have, we all have our journeys and it happened the way it happened. There's no 10 years wasted, there's no nothing. But the point is, I, I found peace and I didn't know what any of it meant, right? So I started Googling it, and I started picking up researching stuff and listening to philosophers, Ram Dass, Alan Watts, Sadhguru, Catholic stuff, all that, just trying to piece together whatever they meant. Because my mom never shared her active religion with me. She meditates, does her things a few hours a day, has since before I was born every day. My father I never really saw, and except for that one time I saw that, but I'd seen him do dark shit, and I'd seen weird things throughout my life. But I didn't know what it all meant. I didn't know how to deal with it. All I knew is I had this huge detachment. I started to look at it like, how am I responsible for any of the chaos I caused? I felt like I had that anger towards God. Like I felt like I was so sad. But then I realized, so wait, who am I? All those actions I did in this body, I know I was present, right? But I wasn't at the same time. So I had this detachment. I couldn't own anything, right? So it was presented to me by psychosis, all right, that I would go into a 12-step program, and I was shown the people that instilled it in me 20 years ago in that 12-step in that little hotel room. And so ever since then, it's been about 6 months, I haven't been medicated on antipsychotics because they didn't work anyway, apparently. And now I'm almost on 11/11. I will have 6 months sober. And this is the first time I've ever been 6 months sober since I was 9 years old. And so I've been working the 12-step program, multiple 12-step programs. I talk to a therapist. I exercise all the time. I've hit over 170 meetings, 180, 190 probably in 150 days. I'm doing the deal, and it states in the deal, in these programs, that if you are completely honest, you have a chance to recover. And to be honest, when I tried before, how could I be honest about what I experienced? Because it was real to me, but I was told I was crazy. By few, I was told it's my journey. By a lot, and by the people that mean most, and by the breadcrumbs, the Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs trail. I finally pieced together a cobblestone road into a fucking endless baguette that takes me to the, I don't know, what do you call the Last Supper. And then the thing is, you don't need to eat because you're already full. You're riding an endless baguette, and you eat when you want, but there's no thought of addiction. There's no thought. Like, that's my belief on the outside world. It's like we came here to experience this, and to learn is to be a man. So what this program has taught me is humility, and it's taught me how to own. Like, I know I caused that chaos, but I had this severance of ownership and this severance of I didn't know how to accept it because I didn't want to look inside and I didn't want to fear it. And now come to find out, as I'm working a recovery program, I'm learning that I put these chains on myself. There's no one who I can put the finger at, God. And now I have this understanding of what it was all about. And I've had this community, like I never had to pick. This last time when I went into psychosis, right, I ended up buck naked in my house. I took my dentures out. I ripped off all the jewelry that's sacred to me, and I was ready to walk out that door and walk the atonement because I was going to try to save my son and save the world too. There was no pick or choose. My God wouldn't have me pick or choose. My Father would not do that. And I realized that, and then that's when it was all presented to me. It was that after that night of buck naked in my living room, soberly, if you will. And it hasn't stopped ever since. And I do a heavy prayer and meditation, a few hours a day. I do it outside. I do it inside. My character now is something I can stand up and I love. I can look in the mirror and love and appreciate myself. I'm learning how to be everything I knew I was on the inside. And I'm learning how to radiate that frequency that I want to experience, that we create our own reality. Like, I just want to pay the gift forward, and I feel that there's a lot of unawareness out there about. So I'm not going to go oppress my psychosis and my views on people, but I can tell you my experience, strength, and hope of how I recovered, and I have had the obsession lifted. I was told I was a lifer at like 16 years old, and in my day, a lifer is something that it means you're going to be doing drugs and alcohol the rest of your life. There's no going back. I've had doctors tell me that you'll have 256 years of mental dependency from these opioids after 13 years of methadone. I've faced everything that was impossible, and I surrendered to the 12-step program I work, and I am honest, obviously. And this is the final step to set myself free in a spiritual, mental, and body thing, I think. This is what I need for my recovery, and the only wish I've ever had is to pay it forward. Only I was trying to pay forward what I didn't have, and I didn't fathom. So all I can say is if you're hurt, you're struggling, there's an out. There is an easier, softer way. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure there'll be stories down the road, that like more is revealed, as they put it in some programs, and doing the work and doing it, and how to be a human, how to identify your character defects, how to find the root of the turmoil that you feel, that suffering. I understand what it's now. It's a choice to be happy or not. I know that sounds shitty. You could be locked up in prison. You could be having a gun at your head. You could be slamming dope. You could not have your kids anymore. But there's some promises they make in these programs, and I believe they're godly programs. I believe it to my core, and more should be revealed.